Well, I want to start by welcoming these wonderful people that are up here. It's lovely to see you. Thank you. Asha, Natasha, Himakshi, Nomzolizi, I probably didn't say that right, but I gave it a go, and Mitchell. These young people, these young leaders that are up here with you today are part of the Melbourne Youth Force. And the Youth Force is a tradition at the International AIDS Conference to be the platform that unites young people at the International AIDS Conference in the lead up to, during, but the thing I think is most important is beyond this week. The work that they have put in over the last year planning to get to this moment doesn't stop on Friday when we have our closing ceremony. In my opinion, that's when the real work actually begins. Now, another tradition of the Youth Force is actually coming up with a youth declaration. And I'm also going to say, like my colleague here, Anders, as a not young anymore person, but young once, I have been to a number of international AIDS conferences and have been part of previous youth forces. And in those experiences of writing youth declarations, I've realised that we have produced some lovely documents. But what happens to documents? Documents are pieces of paper with really well-crafted words on them, but, you know, what happens then? So in the planning, as we got to this moment, we thought, how do we take what has been an important process for young people to document the work that they've done and actually take it up a level? What is the 2014 response for the Youth Force? And so we decided we didn't want a declaration, we wanted a youth action plan. Because this is about action. It's about real action, real goals, time-bound goals, goals that we will challenge ourselves on to measure and monitor our progress towards achieving those goals. And so now the people that really need to tell you about the Youth Action Plan for 2014 are up here with me. So I'll invite Asha to start by giving us an introduction to the Melbourne Youth Force Action Plan.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Ali and Anders. As Ali mentioned, my name is Asha and I'm just one part of the Melbourne Youth Force. So the reason we're here today is because 40% of the world's population is under 25, and between 2005 and 2012, HIV-related deaths amongst adolescents increased by 50%, whilst global HIV-related deaths fell by 30%. The needs of adolescents and young people cannot be ignored any longer. Despite the advances in the fight against AIDS, we are still experiencing a crisis in the adolescent and youth pandemic. We have the tools to address this crisis, but we need governments, policymakers, and healthcare professionals to commit to real and effective change by 2020. We need to treat, we need to reform, we need to educate, and we need to love. So, as Ali mentioned, this year, the traditional Youth Declaration now takes the form of the 2014 Youth Action Plan. This plan prioritises actionable goals for the post-2015 youth and HIV agenda, and we want to use this document to ensure that young people are at the heart of the HIV response during AIDS 2014 and beyond. The 4 key themes of the 2014 Youth Action Plan are treat, reform, educate, and love. And these are identified following a month-long global e-consultation carried out by the Melbourne Youth Force. Issues from each theme were discussed, analysed and debated by over 100 youth delegates from 50 countries over a 2-day youth pre-conference held prior to AIDS 2014. These actionable, time-oriented goals were finalised and now form the 2014 Youth Action Plan that we're here to deliver today to UNAIDS and the Global Fund. This action plan is a plan of tangible goals, a youth call to collective action, and a path towards the first HIV-free generation and the end of AIDS. We, the Youth of AIDS 2014, are stepping up the pace. I would now like to invite my wonderful colleagues, Natasha, Himakshi, Nomzolizi and Mitchell, to present to you the 15 actions of the 2014 Youth Action Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Asha. Treatment for HIV can transform HIV from a fatal disease into a chronic illness. However, this remains inaccessible to many around the world. We, the youth, demand treatment for all. We need universal access to affordable HIV drugs achieved only through removal of restrictive trade policies and fairer distribution of resources globally. The Youth Action Plan has 4 achievable goals. Firstly, to achieve access to an undetectable viral load for all young people living with HIV. To fully fund programs that provide treatment care and support for young people living with HIV, including the Global Fund and PEPFAR. To remove the barriers posed by intellectual property laws, including those in international free trade agreements that impede access to affordable, life-saving medications for young people living with HIV and AIDS. Lastly, to ensure involvement of young people living with HIV and AIDS as equal partners in design, implementation, monitoring of youth-friendly HIV treatment, care, and support services, including treatment literacy and adherence support.
Thank you so much, Asha, and thank you, Natasha, for sharing the goals on treatment. I'd like to share with you all the goals that we've set for reform, which essentially looks at the laws and policies that affect the HIV response. And it's really a crucial part of the HIV response, which is often neglected as we focus on health and we focus on providing essential services. But we don't realize that without an enabling environment that includes laws that protect rights and not violate rights, laws that are supportive and not punitive, all our services are not accessible, they are not youth-friendly, they're not affordable. So I'm just going to go ahead and share the goals from reform. The first one is remove age restriction and parental consent requirements that impede young people's access to HIV and sexual and reproductive health services. This is really, really crucial because oftentimes young people are not able to access critical healthcare services because of these requirements, and it impedes their health and their overall well-being. The second one is prioritize laws and policies that promote young people's health over punitive laws, especially in relation with harm reduction services and especially for young people in closed settings. This is another important aspect that we need to consider. Oftentimes you have situations in countries where you have the health ministry providing essential commodities like condoms or harm reduction services to young people, but you have the law enforcement using those same commodities to arrest young people and put them in detention centers. So there needs to be a harmony between these two. There needs to be a prioritization of young people's health over the criminal justice system. And this is especially true when we talk about decriminalization of certain behaviors, which also restrict young people's access to these important health services. The third one is enact social protection laws for adolescents and young people living with HIV. Adolescents and young people living with HIV face multiple layers of stigma because of their age, because of their HIV status as well. And it's very difficult for them to financially be able to support their own care and support. In many countries, the ARV is free. However, the other services required, even something as basic as food and education and shelter, is very difficult to access for these young people. So it's really, really crucial that we are able to put these laws and policies in place which actually provide social protection and not just look at one aspect of it, which is treatment. The last one is crucial to make sure that all these laws actually work and they actually do what the objective of these laws is. I think oftentimes our challenges with laws and policies are they look good on paper, but the implementation often on grounds is very, very flawed. So the last one is establish accountability mechanisms that ensure young people and civil society are periodically able to review the implementation of laws and policies affecting them. So that's pretty much it, and we hope that you can actually work with us in achieving these goals. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I will be speaking on educate. As young people, we call for comprehensive sexuality education for all young people and demand the following actions be taken. The first is to provide non-discriminatory, non-judgmental, rights-based, gender-sensitive, youth-friendly, evidence-based, comprehensive sexuality education for young people that is context-specific and delivered in partnership with peer educators, supplemented with access to youth-friendly sexual reproductive health and HIV services. The second action we demand is the provision of HIV prevention and treatment literacy in healthcare settings, particularly for young key affected populations, including young pregnant women. We also call for the implementation of programs with religious, cultural, and social leaders that promote positive attitudes towards sexual and reproductive health and rights and reduce stigma against young key affected people, including young people living with HIV. And lastly, we call for the establishment of accountability mechanisms to ensure that young people are involved in the monitoring and evaluation of comprehensive sexuality education and other HIV prevention and treatment education programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Nom Shalisky. I'm going to be briefing you all on love. HIV-related stigma and discrimination is a crippling and debilitating feature within this response to HIV and AIDS. So the Melbourne Youth Force is demanding respect and compassion for all people regarding age, gender, sexual orientation, or health status. So the the Youth Action Plan for Love is strengthen the role of rights-based organisations to better protect the rights of young, key affected populations and young people in general. Second, address the knowledge gap among healthcare providers and the formal education system around young people and their vulnerabilities in key affected areas which contributes to stigma. And finally, we need to address institutionalised stigma and discrimination towards young, key affected populations by reforming punitive laws, engaging with religious leaders, and addressing the heteronormative behaviour and strict gender norms. We need to empower young people to take ownership and control of their health. Thank you, Asha.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you again for being here for such an important session. We really do appreciate the support, and we hope to have your continued support throughout this week and beyond. So the actions that you've heard today are really critical to ending AIDS and responding accurately and effectively to the youth epidemic. I now have a list of stakeholders that we would like to call upon to assist us in achieving the goals you've just heard today. So if you'll forgive me, I'm going to read them out. We call on governments, parliamentarians, bilateral and multilateral agencies, donors and funding mechanisms, pharmaceutical companies, healthcare providers, law enforcement agencies, civil society, including faith-based organisations, religious and social leaders, youth organisations and youth leaders to strategise, collaborate and work together to achieve these goals by 2020. And we hope that the Melbourne Youth Force can work with the Durban Youth Force once it's formed to really evaluate, monitor these goals and hopefully hold all stakeholders accountable for achieving this action plan and making it a reality. So I'm sorry that Michelle Sidibe wasn't here to receive this, but we're very happy that you're here, Mamadou, and thank you, Mark, for being here. We'd love to now hand over to you the 2014 Melbourne Youth Force Youth Action Plan. Thank you.